Candace? Oh, thank you, Minerva.
Good afternoon or good morning, depending upon where you are. Thank you for being on the call today. If you're caring for someone who has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease or another form of dementia, you know that their symptoms and behavior can vary from hour to hour, day to day, week to week, and month to month. It's often difficult to know when to ask for additional help or another level of care when you see signs of decline that are troubling, difficult to manage, or distressing to you and your loved one. Even if your loved one is not yet ready for hospice care, teams from VITAS Healthcare are always available to work with you, your family member, and your physician to help monitor signs of decline and periodically evaluate symptoms and behaviors so that a referral to compassionate hospice care can be made as soon as your loved one is eligible. If you're interested in more information from VITAS or to have an information session from one of our VITAS admission nurses, we are available 24/7, 365 for evaluations and care. You can call VITAS Healthcare at 1-800-723-3233 or visit our website, www.vitas.com. We're specialized in hospice care since 1980, and we're available to support you and your loved one whenever you need a helping hand. We can care for patients in over 17 states across the nation. Thank you and hope you enjoy the call.
Thank you so much, Candace. And now I know that Dr. Tam Cummings is very, very humble, but I wanted you to know she's got a PhD. She founded her company in 2009 with the mission to inspire, educate, and empower dementia caregivers. Now her professional gerontology practice in Texas, in the Texas Hill Country, is recognized as one of the leading educators of dementia caregivers and program design for dementia care nationally. And with that, it's my pleasure to turn it over to you, Dr. Cummings.
Thank you, Evelyn. Thank you, Candace. Thank you, VITAS. God bless hospice people. God bless y'all for what y'all do. Okay, so today we're going to talk about how do you stage your loved one. And this can be a little challenging because you have heard about different types of staging tools. So the staging tool that a physician might use is more likely to be a 3-stage tool of no dementia, early dementia, middle dementia, and late dementia. And these tools were actually designed for research neurologists. So they're medically complex, they're designed for a specialty, and they're just not really helpful for families. So in the 80s, a doctor named Reisberg developed a global deterioration scale. And Dr. Reisberg broke the stages of dementia into 7 stages, beginning with you and I being stage 1, because all staging tools must have a baseline of normal. And you and I are aging normally. We know who we are, where we are, why we are. And the staging tool that we use now is an updated version of Reisberg's global deterioration scale, just because we know more now than we did 40 years ago. And it includes more behaviors that are likely for family members or professional caregivers to be able to recognize those behaviors and make the connection to that behavior means that there is now this much brain damage, which means that this lobe of the brain is damaged because only that lobe does that behavior. And that then means the person now has the mental equivalency of this age person. And this is how much time we anticipate will be in each one of those stages. So what we're going to do today is walk through the 7 stages of dementia, and the tool that you should have is the Dementia Behavioral Assessment Tool, or the DBAT. Now, if your loved one has frontal temporal dementia, there is a separate staging tool for the FTDs. You just have to ask Minerva for it, and she'll give you the FTD staging tool. Now, when we deal with dementia in memory care buildings or in skilled facilities, we are commonly dealing with people in stages 5, 6, or 7 of the disease. And those stages are called the late stages or the terminal stages, because this is where death will occur. Stage 5 people we call all dressed up and ready to go. Stage 6 people we call lost in their own world, because they now finally look, physically sick. And the reason they finally look physically sick is they've lost at least a pound of brain tissue. And then stage 7 people are typically bedbound people. They are people that rely upon us to move them, care for them. They frequently have lost a great deal of language or the ability to make sounds, and they have a very compromised brain. What I like about this picture, and the photographs that you're going to see today are all people with dementia, and they are people in that stage of dementia. And so one of the things that I want you to realize always is a person with dementia does not look physically sick until stage 6 of the disease. And that's confusing for family members, for neighbors, for friends, for people at church or synagogue. It is different for your doctor as well, because we assume that if a person is sick, they look sick. And what we don't understand as a population is that people with dementia are sick. They're actually very frail and very fragile. Even if they haven't lost weight yet, they're still frail and fragile. And their brain damage is such, and human bodies aging with dementia is such, that it is not until an entire pound of brain tissue is gone that the person will look physically sick. And because of that, they're able to fool people, not intentionally, not like I would be doing if I tried to disguise myself and try to fool you to thinking I was someone else. They fool people because humans think if you're sick, you would look sick, and because they still have good function, even with pretty extensive brain damage. Now, why I use this picture is this picture actually has people in stage 5, 6, and 7 in it. And I use it to give you an idea of how your loved one will change and how we recognize people in these different stages. So the lady in the front is very animated. She's very engaged with the person that she's looking at. She's got her hands up, and whatever she's talking about, and there's I don't know if you could see it very well, there's a starfish and some seaweed in front of her. So she's either describing a trip to the ocean or the beach, or she's talking about something that she's done, but she's very animated. She's very locked on to whoever she's talking to. That is a stage 5 person. Now, Evelyn, always in dementia, because the person has brain damage, we are always assessing and looking for pain or for changes. And when I look at the woman in black who's waving her hands, there is something that should be very evident to everyone who can see this picture. Can you see what is in this woman that would tell me something about her care?
Well, she looks like the ready-to-go person in stage 5, but her hands that look like maybe that she has rheumatoid arthritis or some kind of arthritis.
Definitely, absolutely. There is definitely some sort of arthritis or something wrong with her hands. And that then tells me, as her caregiver, whether I'm a family caregiver or the professional caregiver. And if I'm the family caregiver, I want to make sure the professional caregiver understands this. If her hands look like that, she's got arthritis in other places as well. Rheumatoid arthritis is one of the most painful types of arthritis that you can have. It tells me that her skeletal structure is very frail. It tells me that it's important we use anti-inflammatories and that we keep her as hydrated as possible, because that will help with inflammation in her joints. And it tells me that we need to do routine pain assessments on her. So in dementia care, one of the tools you will use is a tool called PAINAD, and that's all capital letters, PAINAD. It stands for Pain Assessment in Advanced Dementia. And if you simply Google in all caps, PAINAD, you will get a 2-page paper. The first page is where you're actually looking at your loved one and writing a numbered score of either 0, 1, or 2 as to how they are doing with facial expressions, verbalizations, body movements, can they be consoled, etc. The second page is explaining every word that we are using to explain what we mean by a furrowed brow, what we mean by breathing, what we mean by body language, what we mean by verbalization, what we mean by consoling. And the way this scale works is if you do your loved one's assessment and they fall somewhere between 7 and 10 as a final score, then your person has a very high level of pain, but because of dementia, is not able to express to us properly where the pain is or how bad the pain is. So one of your jobs as caregiver for the remainder of your loved one's life is to make sure that you're assessing their pain and you're making the nurses and physicians aware of their pain. 50% of the behaviors in your loved one will come from untreated chronic pain because, Evelyn, with each decade of life, I got more aches and pains. Things on my body hurt now that didn't hurt when I was 10 years old. And I hurt right now. So it always makes me wonder, my God, what am I going to feel like in 30 more years? That could be some serious pain. Okay.
I know the story.
Do meditation. It's not only good for your brain, but it can help you deal with pain as you age. Now, the lady in blue looks different. And if you look at the slide closely, she looks a little suspicious of the lady who's talking. She looks a little withdrawn, and the loss of affect on her face even gives her the appearance of looking almost hostile. That is a stage 6 person. She's not actually hostile. What you're seeing now is brain damage. And the lady who's leaning into the picture between the other two ladies, she's got on a flowered dress. She's actually got on a purple necklace. That is a lady at the beginning of stage 7 of the disease. The affect on her face is gone. She's not engaged. She's just adjusting and moving around. So in this slide, you see 3 different stages of a person with dementia. And what I want you to get from that is the way your person looks is also going to change. As they progress into stage 6 and begin to lose weight, they will change. If your loved one lives all the way into stage 7, they will definitely look different. So just prepare yourselves as you go through this journey. There are changes that include the way your loved one looks, not only the way they behave or retain information. That makes sense, Evelyn?
Made sense to me.
Okay, that's all we
Wrote a lot of
needed.
it down.
As you know, the minute Evelyn said yes, we moved right on to the next slide. So if we lost you, we lost you. Okay, stage 1 on any staging tool is normal aging. That is because every staging tool must have a baseline of normal to be able to assess against. And you and I are aging normally. We know who we are, where we are, why we are. It is important as a dementia caregiver, as a professional dementia caregiver, that you remember and realize most of us will live and die at home. Most of us will never require care of assistance because dementias are not normal aging. Now, that can come as a shock to family caregivers because of your stress, because of your exhaustion, because of all of the unanswered questions with your loved one. When you begin to have a moment where, oh, you walk in a room and don't remember what you went in there for. That's not actually dementia. That's normal brain function. It means whatever you're looking for, your brain doesn't care about it. It's done for the day. It wants to go watch bad TV. But if you're a dementia caregiver, when that happens, your first thought is, oh my God, I've got it too. So you always have to remember dementias are diseases of aging, but they are not normal aging. Most of us are never going to need help or assistance. Most of us will live and die at home. We will experience full cognitive function. We actually get thicker and richer brains. So what that means is the roots of the brain, the roots on the neurons in certain parts of the brain in somebody in their 90s are about that long. Those same roots in a 20-year-old are about that long. So as we age, we should continue to experience full cognitive function. It's just that our reflexes are slower. I mean, think about it, Evelyn. Nobody called and asked me to go to the Winter Olympics and do anything on a bobsled or anything that involved lying down, which is what I would be capable of doing. Nobody called and asked me, but we did send a whole bunch of 13-year-olds, a bunch of teenagers. We sent some 20-year-olds, and then we gasped at some 30-year-old and 40-year-old skiers. But mostly it's reflexive action. The other thing, as you and I age normally, our brain gets thicker and richer with information. And when we pass a certain age, usually getting into our 60s, our brain begins to be a little more selective. So my brain, for example, doesn't remember names because I'm never going to see you again and I don't care. And it's not that I don't care about you as a human. It's that my brain says, yeah, I've already met 100 Johns. I don't need to know any more Johns. And it just doesn't pick you up. But I'm very interested in your loved one. And I do remember what you told me about them. So it all is not lost. Part of it is reflexive action. It takes me longer to respond to the question because my reflexes aren't there. Part of it is my files are thicker and richer. My brain's got more information to look through to come up with an answer. And because I am past the age of 50, my brain is now working in a dual hemispheric action. So a question that seems so black and white to a 16-year-old, to me, is many layers of nuanced thinking. So that slowing of response time is reflexive action, a thicker and richer brain, and wisdom. Does that make sense?
I like it.
Okay. Now, everybody writes books on dementia. I actually had a new book published last week called the Itty Bitty Dementia Book. And at the same time, my divorce finally got over and I was able to put the edited version of Untangling Alzheimer's in the book. So now basically I got 2 new books because the real version is out. But those are books on what happens to the brain as it dies. Evelyn, every dementia caregiver, whether they're a professional caregiver or a family caregiver, needs to get the 2 books by Dr. Cohen on normal aging brains. Dr. Cohen was a professor of neurology at either Yale or Harvard Medical, I can never remember. And he wrote first The Mature Mind. And when you finish reading The Mature Mind, you're going to go up to the first 20-year-old you see and kick them in the knee. I just want to prepare you for that type of response. When you realize what normal aging brains do and realize that that's where you and I are, you feel pretty good about getting up in the morning. In the creative age, Dr. Cohen continued his writing, and he wrote about how all of our greatest works of policy, political policy, public policy, social policy, our greatest works of art and literature, our greatest things have all been developed by our oldest population. And when you finish the creative age, you really will go up and kick a 20-year-old person in their knee because you're just going to feel really, really good. And it's going to talk about things like a lady named Anne Robertson. And Anne Robertson, Evelyn, was known as doing wonderful embroidery, just artistic embroidery. And as she aged, she got arthritis and she couldn't do embroidery anymore. She couldn't bend to do the things, but somebody gave her a paint kit and she wanted to make something for her mailman for Christmas. This was when I was growing up. My mother always put a package in for the mailman because, you know, rain, sleet, hail or snow, they still come through. And so Anna Robertson wanted to do the same thing. So she painted a picture for her mailman. You and I don't know Anna Robertson, but we know a woman called Grandma Moses because that's who that was. The Broadway play Damn Yankees was written while the man was 95. The Delaney sisters wrote their first book when they were 99 and 101. Then they wrote their next book, the next 100 years, when they were 100 and 102. And then the one that lived to be 105 wrote the final book. So you will read these books and it will really help to ground you, because when you are surrounded or when your care involves someone with dementia, it really does affect your ability to recognize that there is no such thing as old timers disease. There is normal aging. And as part of normal aging, want to make sure that you do meditation, because that is the best exercise that we know of for your brain. Okay, that makes sense, Evelyn? Everybody with me?
Like it, like it.
All righty. Stage 2 in staging tools is called mild cognitive impairment. And a lot of folks find out that their parents were diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment and their parent is actually already in stage 5. And the reason that I say this is, as you're listening today, in our country, most people are not diagnosed with dementia until stage 5 of the disease. And it's not because you're a bad spouse or a bad adult child. It's because you couldn't get the doctor to see it, and your loved one wasn't bad enough for you to get them to agree to go to the doctor. So there's a unique human behavior, Evelyn, that happens around the world. It's not a Texas thing. It's not an American thing. It is a human thing. If I looked at you right now and said, you know, Evelyn, it seems to me that something's wrong with your memory, your response to me would to be instantly angry. And you would get angry. And so when family members notice something happening to their loved one, you tried to bring it up and you got your head chopped off. And so that's another reason why your loved one didn't get into care or didn't get diagnosed in these earlier stages. The other thing is, we don't have socialized medicine. In Europe, because of socialized medicine, people go to the doctor routinely. In America, we go to the doctor when we're really, really sick. And that is continued to be a trait that Americans have. And so because of that, people in Europe tend to be diagnosed very early in the disease process. American family members don't get diagnosed until it is obvious that something is wrong. Did that make sense, Evelyn?
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Okay, so stage 2 is called mild cognitive impairment, and it's very subtle and it's very slow. And it's usually noticed and briefly dismissed by the person. And it's not understood how long of a time does mild cognitive impairment actually take place. Is it a few years? Is it a decade or more? How long exactly does this happen? And we know by watching people, by interacting with people, and from research, that they pick up that something's wrong. They will look at you, Evelyn, and tell you exactly what's wrong, and then they dismiss it. So several months ago, a friend of mine came out, and I live on a ranch in the middle of Texas. And so people come out, they come out for the weekend. We have big slumber parties. And after breakfast on Sunday, my friend, who is 54, looked at me and said, "Hey, would you test me?" And I said, "Sure, what do you want to be tested on?" And she said, "I want you to test my memory," which totally shocked me because that's not what I thought I thought we were making a joke about something. And I asked her, "Why do you want to be tested?" And she said, "Well, I don't know my mother's maiden name. I don't know the PIN number for my bank account. And I don't know my daughter's middle name. And her daughter is 14. And so I tested her, and she tested positive for dementia. And I asked her how long she had felt this way. And she said, well, they went and she had an MRI done 7 years earlier, but they never followed up. No one followed up. No neurologist followed up. She wasn't referred somewhere else. And I got very alarmed, very concerned, and said, well, next week you've got to let me make phone calls and get you in for testing. We've got a special place in Austin at UT that will do testing because of your age. You're going to need a full battery of tests so we can figure out what's wrong. And she said, oh, we'll worry about it later. And then a few weeks later, I called her and said, okay, I'm calling to see if you got my information on where to call and make an appointment. And she said, oh, we'll worry about it later. And then she came to me and she said, I don't like my husband anymore. I really, really want to be divorced. But you know what? If I do have dementia, he'll take good care of me. He's a good man. And I said, let's go get you tested. And she went, oh, we'll do it later. And so now we're coming up on 9 months after the original conversation, and she still dismisses it, even though in brief moments she recognizes that something's wrong and it's serious. So this is a common thing for us to see in stage 2, but typically, Evelyn, it's going to be the spouse that sees it. It's that subtle. Okay. In stage 3, dementia would now be the diagnosis. And remember, dementia is not the name of the disease. Dementia is the umbrella term for a group of brain diseases that are terminal diseases, and you need to know which dementia it is. One of the common things said to family caregivers, Evelyn, is your loved one has dementia, come back in 6 months. A lady told me last week that her husband was seen by a neurologist who said, your loved one has dementia, you don't need to come back. So families get not the whole picture. If that same doctor had said your loved one has cancer, come back in 6 months, Evelyn, you would have stamped your foot and said, no. Who is going to do the real testing? What kind of cancer is this? Where is this cancer? What stage is this cancer? Where will we go for treatment? Is there a place for care? Is there medication, treatment, radiation, chemotherapy? Are my children and grandchildren at risk? Is it terminal? 30 questions to ask if the word is cancer. And now those are the same questions you ask if the word is dementia. Dementia is not the name of the disease, it's the umbrella term, and we need to know which dementia it is, and you need to know which dementia it is, because it's going to determine everything. It tells us how quickly the disease will progress. It tells us whether or not medications are available or should be used, or if they're so sensitive to medications, nothing is used. It tells us whether your children and grandchildren are at risk. It tells us what kind of care your loved one will require. It tells us whether there is medication for them. We have to know which dementia it is, and so do you, because it's going to tell us what behaviors your loved one will have. And being able to recognize, Evelyn, that none of this behavior is on purpose is a huge step for families. Stages 2 and stages 3 are considered the early stages of dementia, and this is where medication was intended to be started. And research at the National Institutes of Health showed that if we started medication early in these early stages, that about 70% of people would continue to progress into old age, but they would not develop the debilitating features of dementia, which are considered to be stages 5, 6, and 7. That they would die of heart attack and stroke, which is just how human beings die anyway, but they would not develop the features that are what require hospitalization or placement in memory care or a skilled facility. Unfortunately, most people in our country are not diagnosed until stage 5. So there's another question that families never get asked about medication, which is, would your loved one want this medication at this stage? In stage 3, typically the spouse now notices, Evelyn, that this really is something. I really am seeing something. I'm not imagining it. These glitches happen longer and longer. My loved one is not the same person. And because you're a good and loving spouse, Evelyn, you went up to your spouse and you pointed out these things that they're doing that are not correct. And you tried to say, and now we'll go to the doctor and we'll build a plan. And then they took your head off. And they chopped your head off and they handed it back to you on a silver platter. And they were so angry with you that they didn't speak to you for the rest of the day, maybe even the next day. And so you learn not to bring up that they're having memory issues, because when you bring it up, the human brain is not aware that it's doing anything differently. It's called a nosognosia. It's the inability to recognize you have dementia. Evelyn, a couple of months ago, a lady called me and she said, and I answered the phone. I didn't know who it was. And she didn't say good morning, hello, or anything. She said, I am so angry with my husband. He forgot to tell the doctor he has memory issues. And I said, ma'am, I want you to write down what you just said to me. I want you to read it back to yourself 3 times and then call me back. And I hung up the phone. She apparently wrote it down and she read it back. You can't be angry with your person for not remembering things when memory is in the brain, and the brain is what's being attacked in this disease. So right at the beginning, you need to take these words out of your vocabulary. Your loved one is not pretending anything. That takes a 3-pound brain. They are not lying. That takes a 3-pound brain. They are not plotting against you. That takes a 3-pound brain. They're not acting like, they're not showing off. When you see them suddenly respond, it's a social situation and somebody triggered the social conversation of, hi, how are you? And Evelyn, you and I began to learn the social conversation when we were about 2 years old. And the social conversation is, hi, how are you? Oh, I'm fine. How are you? Oh, I'm fine. How are you? Oh, I'm fine. How's your family? Oh, they're fine. How's your family? Oh, they're fine. How's work? Work is fine. Oh, my work is fine. How's the weather? The weather is fine. The answer to everything is fine. And the reason for that is, Evelyn, your mother and my mother both taught me that nobody really cares. This isn't a conversation about, Evelyn, share your deepest secrets with me. This is a social conversation where the answer to everything is fine. And it doesn't mean anything. It's just a social skill. But up until language is lost, because this was learned when you and I were so young, this memory still exists. And as long as I approach the person and say, hi, how are you? They're going to respond with, I'm fine. How are you? They're not aware that they're beginning to lose memory, but human beings get very angry when you suggest that something is wrong with our memory. And those of you who've taken your loved one to a doctor who said to your loved one, you have dementia, your brain's not working correctly, you saw how angry they were all the way home. I frequently get phone calls from people who say, well, my loved one won't go back to that doctor because they're mad at them. And they're mad at them because that doctor did their job and said, your brain's not working correctly. Does that make sense, Evelyn?
Yes, sad sense.
Okay. Now, as you do your staging tool today, you're going to start in stage 3, and you're going to begin to check off the behaviors that you see. You won't check off everything. Some of the behaviors in the dementia behavioral assessment tool tell us it's FTD. Some of them tell us this could be Lewy bodies. So you're not going to check off everything, but you're going to start checking. And when you check, think back, when did you actually see this behavior? When did you see this start? Because unless it's dementia caused by a massive sudden stroke, dementias are very slow moving and slow progressing. It is very slow. It is very subtle. But try to think back to, when did you actually see this? And there's another tool that will help you do that. And that tool, when you Google it, Evelyn, is the IQ code. And it's all one word, IQCODE, in all caps. And this one's going to give you a list of behaviors to look at, Evelyn. And it's going to ask you, did you see this behavior in the last week, in the last month? It's even going to go back to, I saw this behavior 10 years ago. And this is another tool that helps you understand what you're seeing is real, but it's also a tool, another tool your physician will recognize, because this is a medical tool that's used to help assess when you begin to see this behavior and when you begin to actually see the dementia process. Did that make sense, Evelyn?
Yes, and I'm copying a whole bunch of this down because I didn't know so many of these things.
Okay, and you're putting it in the chat room so other people can see it's IQ code and pain.
IQ code.
Oh, you're awesome. Okay, the middle stage of dementia, the doctor uses the term moderate dementia, which makes it sound like it's not a big deal. But at this point, there's about 4 ounces of brain tissue that are now gone. The connectivity is beginning to be messed up, and your person fluctuates between being pleasant and being very easily agitated. So in testing, if you got your loved one to testing, you may have noticed that if it was a specialist in dementia, that specialist got kind of tough with your loved one. And the reason they got tough with your loved one is they're pressing to see how agitated they get if I force them to answer this question. Now, Evelyn, this can be really, really hard for families anytime the doctor is questioning your loved one, because your loved one is going to look at you to help me answer the question, and you can't. And your instinct is to answer the question for them to the point that I may tell you, you have to go sit in another room because I can't talk to your mom while you keep answering the questions. I'm trying to figure out where she is. Does that make sense?
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's a lot of emotion that comes up because you feel your mother's embarrassment and her pain because she knows she should know those answers and they're not there anymore. The person may notice that things are wrong with them, but then again, they dismiss it, and this is not understood. They have great social skills, and the social skills are so good that they fool professionals, they fool families, they fool neighbors and friends, but they're not fooling them intentionally. They're simply responding to social skills, and they don't look physically sick. And people think that if you really had dementia, then grandma would look sick. Evelyn, I've had a grandson who, from everything I could tell about him, was a wonderful young man. But he very plainly told me that he understood dementia. And what he understood was if we would quit coddling his grandmother, and he actually used the word coddling, if we would quit coddling her and force her to get up and walk, then she would get up and walk. And the reason that he believed this was that no one had told him her brain was dying. And when your motor cortex is destroyed, it doesn't matter how much you want to walk, you can't walk. You don't understand walk. That's not in your brain anymore. And once that was explained to him, then he got it. But he believed if we made her use language, if we would make her walk, if we would make her use her brain, she would get better. And the thing that's so bizarre is you guys were doing this to her at home and she wasn't getting better, but you want professionals to somehow make this stop. And it all came back down to no one had ever explained to him or his family that his grandmother's brain was dying. So one of the things that can help your family members make a shift is to help them see dementia as brain cancer. We know, Evelyn, that if paramedics come to your house to pick up your spouse and you tell them that your spouse has dementia, they will treat them more harshly than if you said, my spouse has brain cancer. If you say brain cancer, the paramedic understands there's something seriously wrong with their brain. If you say dementia, the paramedic believes that your person is doing these behaviors on purpose. And if the paramedics are at your house for your loved one is typically doing some type of behavior because when they get delirium, one of the types of delirium is to be agitated, physically and verbally aggressive. If your loved one has vascular dementia, they're more likely to be physically and verbally aggressive. If your loved one has fallen, they may have hit their head, so they're agitated. Your loved one may be agitated because suddenly your house is full of 10 big men with a big gurney and all kinds of equipment coming in. And they may be agitated because there's a reason you called 911. And infection makes people with dementia more agitated. Being sick is more likely to make them agitated, and untreated pain. And so because of this, they fool people, and because of the stigma of dementia. So for yourself, for your families, if you start thinking of it as brain cancer, it's easier for you to make the jump that they're not responsible for their behaviors. They're simply responding to the brain tissue that is functioning. Did that
Great
make
idea.
sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, stages 5, 6, and 7 are called the late stages or the terminal stages because these are the stages where, for most people, death is going to occur. And remember, the miracle, non-miracle of dementia is that most of your loved ones will not live to stage 7 of the disease. Most of your loved ones will die of a heart attack or stroke in stage 5 or stage 6 of the disease. And that's not much of a miracle. In stage 5, the doctor refers to this as moderately severe dementia, and there is significant changes and decline in stage 5. In the beginning of stage 5, Evelyn, this person has the mental equivalency of a 12-year-old. In the middle of stage 5, an 8-year-old. At the end of stage 5, a 4-year-old. That's why you, a family caregiver, may go to bed at night thinking, I swear to God, I've been taking care of a 75-year-old 4-year-old, because your loved one has declined to late stage 5. And that is significantly different the beginning of stage 5. And once you begin to look at your person in the stage they're in and realize that the beginning of stage 5 means a half a pound of their brain tissue is gone, and they still say, "Hi, how are you?" At the end of stage 5, a pound of brain tissue is gone. And that's why they're now the equivalent of a 4-year-old. That's why you go to bed feeling like you've been dealing with a 4-year-old, because that's how much brain there is at that time. Most families are not able to make the jump to something is really wrong until stage 5, because stage 5 has some significant short-term memory behaviors. And one of those big behaviors is I repeat the questions over and over and over. I call you at work 20 times a day and don't realize that I've called you. My daughter calls from California and says, "Hi, how are you?" And I say, "Oh, I'm fine. How are you?" And we have the social conversation. She hangs up, calls my sister, screams at her, "How dare you say mom is sick?" I talk to her on the phone, and you know what? She's just fine. And it's because that social conversation is still there. This person's face will begin to change. And as family caregivers, you're not really going to see that until you go back about 4 years after the death and you begin to look at the pictures of your loved one. And then you will begin to see that there were significant changes in how they looked as they progressed through stage 5 of the disease. Stage 5 of the disease is where you're stealing from me, Evelyn, and I know you're stealing from me, and it's very logical. My brain has figured it out. My brain doesn't realize that it's sick, but my brain has a memory that I always put my purse right there. And I know I put my purse right there because my brain says your purse is right there, but now I can't find my purse and you're here. And now my brain realizes it never trusted you anyway. It always thought you were a little sneaky, and you're here and I can't find my purse. So you must have stolen my purse or my car or my keys or my bank account or my house or my clothes
Or my wife.
shoes or my jewelry or my something. Because my brain tells me it's here and I can't find it and you're here, so you must have taken it. So I am ugly to you. I'm mad at you. I accuse you of stealing from me. And that hurts your feelings because of course you haven't stolen from me. And so you leave. Now, family members don't realize a stage 5 person means I've left a 12-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 4-year-old at home alone. They don't realize that the rhythm, the natural rhythm to tell us that it's time to go to bed and it's time to get up, that's no longer running in sequence in your loved one's cells. It's beginning to run cattywampus to each other. And so at 3 a.m, your loved one is up cooking for a cat that doesn't even exist. And while your loved one is up in the middle of the night, she finds her purse in the freezer. Now, when that happens, she doesn't think, "Oh, I need to go call Evelyn and apologize to her. I remember now I brought in the groceries and I put my purse in the freezer." Instead, the thought is, "Oh, how sneaky Evelyn is. Look at her. She hid my purse in the freezer. Now she's going to come back. She didn't think I'd find it. I better go hide my purse before she comes again." And so the game starts all over again. Now, understand, in professional care, we're always listening to somebody stole something from me, because there are people that exploit the elderly. And we do want to make sure that's not happening. But otherwise, this is a normal behavior to occur in stage 5. In stage 5, the person begins to hunt and gather. Dementia people are very busy. These are not lazy people. Hunting and gathering means I'm going from room to room to room looking for neat new things. And if I find it, I pick it up, I add it to my collection, I go to the next room where I may hide it. I may be Goldilocks. Goldilocks goes from room to room to room, trying out neat new beds. And when she finds a bed that's just right, takes a nap, wakes up, goes on about her day. All of these are normal things. Stage 5 people shouldn't be driving. They have brain damage. They shouldn't be living alone. They have brain damage. And if your loved one is in stage 5 and you're doing care for them at home, you're now doing the care of 12 professional caregivers. And there is a reason why there is a death risk for the dementia family caregiver. There is a real reason why you're exhausted. You're not imagining anything. You really are doing an intense amount of work, and you really are slowly, slowly running the risk of killing your own self before your loved one dies.
Right.
Before COVID, the death of the family caregiver for dementia was 2 out of 10 caregivers died before the person with dementia died as the direct result of the stress of care. With COVID in place for going on 3 years now, that number is believed to have risen to 3 out of 10. So what you're doing is incredibly difficult, and it does affect your own health. So you need to be aware of that. When I ask families, have you seen a doctor during COVID? They go, oh yeah, I've made sure she was there to see the doctor. No, I wasn't talking about your loved one. I was talking about you, the caregiver. Have you, the caregiver, seen the doctor? And if your answer is no, then you need to see your doctor because your health is at risk. You're doing the work of a dozen people. You got to take care of you. Your person still doesn't look physically ill. And because of that, family members, friends may insist on trying to make them come into reality. They don't remember that their husband has died, but your mother's got an old friend that calls her every day and tells her about the funeral. You can't have that. You have to protect your loved one. They're beginning to have a lot of trouble processing information. Nothing that they're doing is on purpose. And even though they still don't look sick here, this is a very sick person. They are not safe to drive a car. And Evelyn, if your person has a dementia diagnosis and they drive a car and have a car wreck, insurance isn't going to pay for the car wreck, and you can end up getting sued. Plus, they're a danger to both themselves and others. And I can't tell you how many wives I've met who continue to let their husband drive, even though they're terrified the whole time he's behind the wheel. So you've got to get the keys away, and you've got to recognize this disease is real and my loved one is not safe. So all you're going to do is your loved one will go down the slippery slope. If it's Alzheimer's or the other dementias, if it's vascular dementia, your loved one will come down into a stage, get stabilized on medication and be stable, and then they will stair step down as another vascular event occurs. So their movement through the disease process will seem different. That makes sense, Evelyn? Okay. Stage 6 is called severe dementia. And now your person looks sick. They're now beginning to shuffle. They're rapidly losing words and language skills. And remember, language is here. And this side is formal language, how you and I are talking. This side is singing, cussing, forbidden words, hateful words, ugly words. This is what's left. So you may begin to hear your loved one use the N-word. You may begin to hear them use hurtful or ugly words. Look at that girl. She's fat. She looks fat. I don't like her. She's fat. She's ugly. It is brain damage. It is not a sign that God has forsaken your loved one. It is not a sign your loved one's going to hell. It's a sign of brain damage. And Evelyn, we do not understand, why does formal language die first? Why are these things still left? So family members hear their mother or father curse. They've never heard that before. They've never heard them use racial language before. And then they hear church, and their mother can sing all the words to Amazing Grace, and the family thinks she knows what she's doing. No, she doesn't. It's what's left in the brain that is still functioning. Movement and coordination is now very impaired. Falls are beginning to happen. This is the stage where we anticipate a spiral fracture of the hip that is caused when your loved one stands and turns, not when they fall. The break in the hip actually happens when they stand. And the x-ray and the CAT scan will show that. But if your loved one breaks their hip in stage 6 of the disease, it means the disease is very progressed. It means that the end of life is near. And it means the brain is now too damaged to maintain the skeletal structure. One of the things I hear commonly, Evelyn, is, oh, my guy's still real healthy. No, he's not. The brain runs the body. And eventually the damage in the brain shows in the body, but it doesn't show until stage 6. Stage 6 is where the term 36-hour day comes from, because now in this stage, your loved one can stay awake and in motion, for 36 to 72 hours, and you and I can't do that. They look sick, they sound sick, and in stage 6, they will begin to lose weight. And the normal weight loss in a person with dementia is 1/3 to 1/2 of their body weight is lost before the end of life due to the effects of the disease, not because of poor care. They're colder than you and I are now because brain damage. The parietal lobe cannot keep the body warm. Their temperature is between 97 and 95 degrees. They are a great fall risk, and they fall frequently until they are finally wheelchair bound. And it's very challenging to do the activities of daily living with them. This is when we get a lot of behavior because the ADLs include a lot of intimate and personal care. Now, the way I remember the activities of daily living is it's what I did this morning. I woke up and I transferred from a lying to a sitting to a standing position. And then I ambulated to the first stop of the day for everybody is toileting in the bathroom. And then I did my bathing, my grooming, my dressing, my eating. And those are very personal things. And a lot of those are very intimate things. And so because the caregiver's not using my name enough, they're not recognizing I've got rheumatoid arthritis. It hurts when you move that knee. They're not recognizing to use my first name and explain to me what we're doing to keep a conversation going, to engage me, to be pleasant and social and polite to me. If they're doing that, then I can get through my ADLs. If they're not doing that, then you're getting calls that your loved one is combative. And the reality is, I'm going to check for pain. I'm going to see what my caregiver is doing. Because the chances are it's pain or it's the caregiver that is causing these challenges. Did that make sense, Evelyn?
Makes sense to me.
Okay. And then some of your loved ones will live all the way into stage 7. And this is called very severe dementia. Your person is now bedbound, they're wheelchair bound, they've got extensive brain damage, they've lost at least 1.5 pounds of brain tissue. They're having difficulty eating and swallowing food, chewing and swallowing food without choking on it, which means the disease has now reached the brainstem. Their language skills are mostly gone, although they can occasionally suddenly pop out with a whole phrase or a sentence that makes sense, or you say, I love you, and they say, I love you back. They're incontinent of bladder and bowel. And Evelyn, even though they're bedbound, their fall risk goes up. There's something in the human body. They continue to try to get out of that bed. And we can't use railings. Railings are forbidden in our country. They're forbidden around the world because people with dementia get tangled in them and hurt themselves or actually cause death by getting tangled up. The only people that can use railings and restraints are hospitals. Memory care buildings, skilled buildings can't do that. And the urinary tract infection risk goes up because the brain damage means that the body really cannot protect itself from infection. If your person lives to stage 7, the cause of death is typically not heart attack or stroke. The cause of death now begins to be more likely to be the death from dementia, which is that the person aspirates a food particle or something into their lungs. They develop aspiration pneumonia. From that, they develop sepsis or blood poisoning. From sepsis or blood poisoning, they have renal or kidney failure. And that is considered the death from dementia. The body is simply overwhelmed with infection. Okay, so you're going to start in stage 3. You're going to check off everything you see in your loved one's behavior. You're going to realize that I grade harder than you do because it's not my mother, it's not my spouse, it's not my father. I'm grading clinically. They either can get to the bathroom every time to pee or they're incontinent of bladder. It's that simple. They can either do it or they can't. They either actually recognize you every single time or your memory is beginning to be lost from them because of the brain damage. The cell structure holding you, who you are to them, is being destroyed. And that's what's happening to all of their memories. They're being destroyed until they go back to where they're like caring for an infant. And those of you who are parents, remember, when you brought your babies home from the hospital, they slept about 20 hours a day. When your loved one reaches stage 7, it's also common that they sleep for 20 hours a day. Okay, so you're going to start in stage 3, check everything. When you finish checking, have a friend look at it, have another family member do their own staging, and then compare your answers, draw a line and date it. Come back every 2 months and see where your loved one is now. And Evelyn, that helps you prepare for it's time to move to memory care or to skilled. It helps you realize how quickly the disease is actually moving. It helps you realize this is brain damage. They're not doing this on purpose. And it helps to give the monster a name. And part of that monster's name is understanding the diseases are progressive, they're terminal, and their behaviors of your loved ones tell us how much brain is damaged, and the stages tell us how much time is estimated to be for that stage. And all of that information is on your staging tool. Okay? Does anybody have any questions?
Holy smokes. I will look at my little magic thing here and ask you to unmute your phone or your Zoom, and we'll take questions. Please go ahead.
Sometimes people are simply too depressed, Evelyn. That's my effect. As I depress people, I make them cry, and then my job here is done. So
Well,
normally we have lots of questions.
There
Okay.
was one posted on chat. How do we help alleviate the irritation from loved ones, especially the patient's spouse, when the patient is not as attentive, remembering their meds, mealtime, or their bedtime routine, when the patient is no longer the person they once were?
How do we help their spouse? Is that the question?
Yes, and that's in our
The
chat.
spouse, yeah, the spouse has to recognize it's a real disease. It's actually destroying the brain. A CAT scan will show damage, an MRI will show damage, and the behavior of the person shows the damage to the brain. And so it's a matter of education for that spouse. The other thing is, a lot of times we start looking at the parent who's obviously ill, and we stop looking at the caregiving parent. And it's not at all unusual, Minerva, that you could have both parents have dementia. They're in different stages of dementia. They have different types of dementia. So one of the things I would be looking at is educating the spouse, and then looking seriously at the spouse. Does the spouse also have a form of dementia?
Or may need a lot of support.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe so exhausted they can't do it anymore.
Right. There was another question on what stage someone would qualify for hospice.
Hospice is usually something that if the person was at home, we would begin to see hospice being talked about in late stage 6. It is going to be one of the things you're going to look for is your person is not able to use language. Your person has lost weight 3 months in a row. Your person can't answer questions. So the criteria for hospice has changed. But if you think your person has declined to that state, you'll call the doctor. If the doctor concurs, the doctor will write an order for hospice, and then you'll get visited by a hospice nurse who will do the assessment on your loved one and make a determination as to whether or not they're qualified. And they may not be qualified this month, but that doesn't mean they won't be qualified in a month or two. And hospice is an additional layer of care for your loved one. Their care goes to a hospice doctor who is a specialist in hospice care. They tend to be specialists in pain management. A person will come to your home whose sole job is to bathe and care for your loved one 2 to 3 times a week. You have a hospice nurse who comes to your home or to the community your loved one is in. You also have the social worker, religious or spiritual support. So you have an entire team, a whole other layer of care. But if they don't qualify this month, the hospice company is going to keep you on record. They're going to keep checking back with you. But you would start with your doctor, and they can explain the criteria in your state.
Great.
Dr. Tam, this is Debbie McGee. And on that note, I wanted to ask, so my mom's 89 and she's done pretty well. She's in her home, got caregivers, and a lot of what you're talking about in stage 6 is what we've, observed in the last year. But one question on this hospice thing, mom, for the first time really in March of 2021, began to have recurring UTIs. And, we've done everything we need to. The doctor's prescribed. She'll go for about a month cured, and then it will start to come back. And so in the fall, he went to another level of antibiotics. And I share all this with you because, he knows that mom has never done well on real antibiotics. And the second round in late December made her really sick. And we got through it, and we've been doing cranberry supplements since then. But
So that
my
doesn't
sister,
do anything. That
no,
doesn't
I
do
know.
anything.
But here's the thing, my sister and I struggle with, okay, so next time that UTI gets so bad, she never complains of pain. It's
Mhm.
just that added confusion that we see
Mhm.
on top of her normal confusion.
Mhm.
And so we struggle with the meds make her sicker than the UTI.
The
And
UTI will kill her.
I understand that, but
Well,
and-
I'm not sure you are, because you're going, but the medicine makes her so sick. The
so you're saying it doesn't matter how the
UTI
medicine.
will kill her. A urinary
If
tract
it's-
infection won't kill you. It won't kill me. It will kill a person with dementia. And what you want to remember is she is progressing. Okay. Once the UTIs begin to follow each other, they're progressing late into the disease. You want to do what it sounds like your doctor did, a culture and sensitivity test. So every 2 to 3 UTIs, the next one needs to have a culture and sensitivity test to determine, is the antibiotic still working? Because her body is slowly creating a super drug resistant UTI.
Yeah,
Part
that's
of
why
the
I went to the
theory-
stronger one.
Yeah, part of the theory is that because of brain damage, the infection doesn't necessarily get wiped out. It just goes to a low enough level that we can't find it in a urine test. It shows that it's gone now, but it'll eventually become that 2 days after she finishes, it will start again. And so the theory is that the brain is so damaged that the body really doesn't wipe out this underlying infection. And so it just will begin to come faster and faster. And what y'all are doing is appropriate, but every few UTIs, you just want to make sure the CNS test has been done. And that's what they'll call it. The nurses and doctors will just call it CNS, but that stands for culture and sensitivity. The other thing is cranberry supplements don't do anything. They don't do anything for me. They don't do anything for you, and they don't do anything for your mother. So if she enjoys cranberry juice, great. But the reality is, for cranberry juice to actually work, I'd have to drink about 1,000 gallons a day. So it's
Well,
one of
if
those
she's not
old
drinking it,
urban
we're giving her-
medical myths. It's really just fluid.
Yeah, we're
Fluid
not giving her the
caffeine.
fluid. She's drinking water. We're giving her
Yeah,
the
But
gel.
she can also have anything that doesn't have caffeine in it is fluid. So it doesn't have to be water. I know people that'll drink fluid all day long. Doesn't mean they want to drink a whole bunch of water. So everything's got to be uncaffeinated, because if it's not decaf, the body doesn't absorb the fluid correctly, and we want her to absorb fluid. So if she were in a community, they would be doing a push for meals or a push for fluid at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then about 10 o'clock in the morning, about 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock in the afternoon, there'd be another big push for fluid. And then there would be another fluid push right before she goes to bed.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're trying to push fluids in throughout the day. And then how do you check for dehydration in your mother? Okay.
Well, we measure a lot of things, but you did point on something, because there's only 2 things my mother drinks, and that's Cokes and water.
Okay, well,
And-
the Coke is stopping the water from absorbing, and people with dementia don't get caffeine. It
Right.
very much affects their brain. But first, let's talk about checking her for dehydration. So it's not this, okay? Old white skin don't snap. The only snap we get is African Americans, great snappy skin, Mexican Americans, great snappy skin. Asian Americans, great snappy. Caucasian, nothing. We get nothing. It's old skin. So, and I'm going to do this on me because I have nobody here to show you. You're going to ask your mom, can I press your forehead? And then right between her eyebrows, right above her eyebrows, you're going to put your thumb down and you're going to press very, very hard for 5 seconds. When I do this to people, I put my hand at the back of their head to hold it because of how firmly I'm pressing. I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I remove my thumb. And if you can see the white circle of your thumb, she needs fluid.
Ah,
Okay.
good
So
tip.
in the community, we would use apple juice, orange juice, Kool-Aid, lemonade, ginger ale. Root beer is actually a dark fluid that doesn't have caffeine in it. So root beer is allowed, but no Coke, no Dr. Pepper. Now you can't take her off caffeine in one day. You'll give her a caffeine headache. She'll think she's dying and she'll try to eat one of y'all. That's how angry she will get. So very slowly, you begin to mix her Coke with decaffeinated Coke over the period of about a week. Mix them first 1/3 to 2/3, then half to half, then 2/3 to 1/3, then finally we're at decaffeinated Coke. She can't have caffeinated coffee. We do not give caffeine to people with dementia because it affects their brain. It really does make them agitated, and they're not absorbing that liquid properly. Okay.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank
so
you so
far?
much.
Okay, so you're going to use what is called the medical social model, and you're going to do that. And to give you an idea, because I'll bet you I'm dehydrated because I've been on podcast all day and all I've had is apple juice. So look at my forehead when I move my thumb. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Was there a white flash there? Because it will happen like that.
It did look like there might have been. Did it?
There, I promise you, I can promise you there is. I'll bet I can see it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, yes, I
Yeah.
definitely need some fluid. So I don't normally recommend Evelyn people sit and do this to themselves and look in the mirror, but it's how we check our people with dementia for dehydration.
That's a great tip.
It
That
gives us
is.
a better
Thank you.
idea, and it's not as upsetting to them as if I'm trying to pinch old white skin, which just this is just
Right.
doesn't work.
We have a couple more
other thing-
questions. Deborah, are you
Got
finished?
her
with
at
your-
home. Also,
Thank you.
monitor how many fluids she gets per day. If she were in a community, we would be writing down how much she eats and how much she drinks. Okay. That way, your caregivers are keeping up with what she's drinking during the day and switch out to different things because we know they like sweets. So sweet liquids will work. Okay.
Mhm.
Next
I
question.
know. Thank you.
Okay. I had a question. Does Parkinson's speed up the development of dementia?
Parkinson's becomes a dementia. Parkinson's disease dementia is the 6th most common form of dementia. If you're the later in life a person develops Parkinson's disease, the more rapidly it becomes Parkinson's disease dementia. And then if your loved one has Parkinson's disease dementia, we're also watching for Lewy body. If your loved one has Lewy body, we're watching for Parkinson's disease dementia. These two dementias are now considered first cousins of one another. And if we see one, we look for the other. So go to lbd.org, lewybodydementia.org. And Evelyn, there has to be a Parkinson's disease dementia website or something.
I can find one for them. Yeah.
Okay, so you would look it up, but Parkinson's disease becomes Parkinson's disease dementia, and that is the 6th most common form of dementia.
Yes, for all of those on the line, I would tell you that I will put together some resources. All the things that we've talked about, the books, the links to the assessments, whatever else was mentioned, I've been writing it down, lbd.org. So, and the pain aid and the IQ code, you'll get those all with your post-session questionnaire. Now, I do have another question for you. Dr. Cummings, what do you recommend for pain for someone with dementia?
You'll talk to your physician about it, but what people don't realize is you and I can have up to 3,000 milligrams a day of ibuprofen, Tylenol, or Aleve. And the biggest pushback you're going to get, Evelyn, is from the doctor who goes, well, that could hurt their liver. You know what? They've got a terminal brain disease. They're dying. Let's take care of pain. The other thing people with dementia don't realize is your loved one can have narcotic pain medicine. And the next thing you're going to hear from either the doctor or from a family member is narcotic pain medication. What if she gets addicted? Again, she has a terminal brain disease. Let's treat the pain. But what we have to do, Evelyn, is pain medication cannot be PRN. PRN on a medication means that I know I now need that medicine, and I know to go to the nurse and ask for that medicine because I'm having that pain right now. Your loved one can't do that. They have dementia. So why in the world would we have PRN medicines listed for them? And yet I can go into any dementia community, open up any chart, and I will find PRN medication on there. It has to be routine, daily pain medication to treat the effects of chronic pain. When I was in graduate school, Evelyn, we were told that if we could suddenly feel the average pain of an 80-year-old person, that we would actually scream aloud and fall down. That's how intense the pain would be. But pain in life comes slowly. Those sprained ankles in high school, that knee you twisted in high school, that knee you tore up skiing, that knee that you got replaced, that slow accumulation of pain. And you know you have it because you watch movies, and when you see on Home Alone, every time those burglars fall backwards and hit their back, I just go, oh, that hurts so bad. When you watch your grandchildren jumping outside, they jumped from a rock to the ground. Oh my God, that was 12 inches. My knees, that hurt. There's a slow accumulation of pain as we age, and we have to address it in your loved one. And it also means before storms come. When you ask professional caregivers at a conference who tells the weather better, the weatherman or people with dementia, they'll tell you in a loud voice, our residents do, people with dementia do. They can tell the change in weather because arthritis. The barometric pressure changes begin 48 hours before the storm gets here. I'm already hurting. And it's the same with your loved one. So the other thing to remember is this is a generation that was taught that you don't whine about your pain. And you all know from your loved one that on that pain scale of 10, they're probably a 15. But when the doctor asks them, because of their upbringing, because they're male, because of how mom and daddy were, they say, no, my pain's down here, it's a 3. And you're like, oh my Lord, their pain makes them scream out loud. So you've got to advocate for that. And they can have a significant amount of medication to deal with their pain. And a lot of people don't realize this. Your loved one can be in so much pain at the end of life that they can advance on and die because they're in too much pain for their body to continue the process of actively dying. So it's critical that we take care of pain in your loved one and that you are their advocate.
Wow. Well, thank
That's
you
my
for that.
cheerleading for today. Whoa.
Minerva, I know I missed a question or two. Did you get those?
Yes. One was, can you explain the fact that they are feeling colder more than ever or more than it is? Is the brain unable to tell them what their real comfort is?
No, the damage in the brain means that the brain can't make the body be the right temperature anymore. So what should be happening is on the day of the month that we do weights, and every building in this country does weights on one day of the month. On the day of the month they weigh your loved one, they should also be taking their temperature. The normal temperature for people with dementia is between 95 and 97 degrees. They are colder than you and I are. It doesn't mean they understand it. If you see signs of cold are shivering, signs of cold are trying to cover the hands under the arms or tuck the hands between your legs, a person who tries to pull themselves up, they are colder than you and I are, so you must dress them more warmly. It's happening because of brain damage, and they're not aware of why they're cold. They just know that they're cold.
Thank you. Minerva, anything else?
Last one was a comment. My husband was diagnosed in 2017 with dementia. At 2018, diagnosed with Alzheimer's. I've been told it's a special case because he was a top secret war planner, and I believe he fools doctors, family, and friends. He is so deceptive and convincing. When will they solve the special case? Our home is his safe haven, and believe me, it's a whole different ballgame.
I don't understand why he's a special case. What is, I'm missing that part.
That is what
He's-
the
he's
doctor
fooling-
said.
I don't understand what that is supposed to mean. If he's fooling other people, Minerva, it tends to come back to he doesn't look sick yet and he's got great social skills. And if he did something in real life, if he really was a type of spy, then he's very good at deception just naturally. But it doesn't mean he's doing that now, because now he has brain damage. And so where families think they're fooling people is that the people don't realize he won't look sick until stage 6. He won't look sick until he loses a whole pound of brain tissue. Social skills are our oldest skills. And if I trigger a social skill by saying, hi, how are you? He's going to immediately respond, but it doesn't mean that's cognition. That's just a social skill and old memory, but that fools people. Does that make sense to the person? So, and it's not intentional. It's not like he's sitting down going, let me fool them. It's that these other people don't spend 24 hours in your shoes. And every caregiver I know will tell you the same thing. Everybody is fooled by my spouse. They're fooled by my mother. And it's not that your mother's trying to fool people. It's that humans think if you're really sick, you'd look sick. Humans think that they don't understand dementia means the brain is dying. And the brain actually has to have significant damage before it's evident to others. So if those same people, if that doctor, your friends, your neighbors, and those other family members came and spent a week with your husband, then they wouldn't be fooled anymore. It's just that when you get him out, you've stimulated him, he's got more brain chemistry firing, and he's obviously a very social guy. And that's what fools families. That's what fools medical professionals, even though you think that wouldn't happen, it does. It's very, very common. Okay, I get everybody?
There is one last question from Tawny. What about I'm not good with medical names. It's in the chat. Methamphetamine hypurate for UTIs.
I don't know. I don't even know what we're talking about. I think you're putting an antibiotic in there. Again, that's something you need to ask your physician about. Okay.
Okay, and that's it for the chat.
Thank
All
you
right,
so
then.
much, Minerva. I want to just say that we'll be getting a post-session questionnaire in a couple of days, and it will include all of those resources that we've talked about, unless you're not registered for this session. If somebody gave you the phone number and you just called in and you're not registered, please call our customer service, 866-390-6491, 866-390-6491, and get registered. And the good part is you'll not only be able to get the resources and our post-session questionnaire, you'll also get the monthly calendar, which has so many different, sessions that have been planned. They're all by experts, people like Dr. Cummings, who I just want to tell you, I learned so much from you, and I've been a social worker for 50 years. So thank you so much.
God bless our social workers.
I
I have a social work degree, Evelyn. So I was being interviewed by the Austin American Statesman a couple of weeks ago, and she said, what do you do? And I'm like, well, I'm a gerontologist. Well, how did that happen? Well, I was a social worker, and then I went back to graduate school and became a gerontologist, and I got my doctorate. And when the story came out, it said that I was a social worker with a gerontology practice. So, I don't know, maybe, but never been referred to that way before. But God bless social workers. We're smarter than nurses, and we know it. So
Well, I want to let people know that we so appreciate you joining us today. For those of you who participated, it means so much because it really enriches our program. I also want to thank you for what you do. Dementia care is so difficult. And for those of us who've been through it or who've worked with it, we know how difficult it can be. I'd like to thank WellMed Charitable Foundation for supporting caregivers in clinics, community centers, teleconnection sessions, and with the information-filled website. Please get on there, www.caregiverteleconnection.org, and go to those podcasts because there's many of them, and they're really good. And I want to thank you so much, Dr. Cummings, for your energy, for your time, for your preparation, for your knowledge. This was great. So I'm going to stop the recording. I want to thank you all for joining us and hope you will join us again soon.
take care, everybody. Get in
Bye-bye
the
now.
support group.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Evelyn. Bye, WellMed. Thank you, Vitas.